Hello? If any of you can't hear me, let me know. I'm not going to talk to you very long. I don't really like to make speeches. But I thought I would say a few things, and then you would ask me questions, and we'd get something started. I sort of have to begin where everybody's mind more or less is, where mine is too, with the recent events in Birmingham, in Alabama. And we all have been, in the last few days, exposed to analysis and counter-analysis and even charge and counter-charge about the events down there. And there's no point in going over, again, things I know you know too much about, such details as hoses and dogs leashed on children, and the police chief saying, "Look at those niggers run," and all the crisis now in Birmingham because they run out of jails and paddy wagons. These things we sort of know, that is to say, we've seen them. What I want to suggest is something beyond that, and it's this. And I want very strongly to suggest it to you, because you're the generation which may be able to achieve the American Revolution. People 20 years older than you have several reasons for wanting to believe and for believing that what is happening in Birmingham is special. They do not know and do not want to know that for any Negro born in this country, Birmingham is not special at all. It seems melodramatic if you're white. And even if you are a member of the Negro middle class and you think that you have achieved a certain status, security, that your children are relatively safe because you have a house and a car and never have to deal with the naked facts of segregation, because if you have enough money you can be protected against those. Both camps are deluded, both the white people who think Birmingham is special and Negroes who think that they can somehow escape the implications of the presence of this city in this country. My point is, when I traveled south for the first time, I was past 30. I've been out of this country for a very long time, and I'd always been afraid to go south because my father and my mother came from the south. And when you're little, and this is one of the things which it means to be a Negro, things filter into your consciousness when old folks are talking and think that you're asleep. And what they're talking about, of course, is the trouble they've seen, what they've been through, and what they're also talking about, though you don't realize this until you're older, is the trouble that you, the child, is going to see. And what's in the forefront of the Negro parent's mind is how to protect the child from what he knows is coming, from the day the child is called a nigger, and even more important, from the day when the child is a very young man and has begun to believe what the Republic says, that he can go no higher than the Republic says. When I went south, the plane landed in Atlanta, and I wandered around it. The thing which struck me, and this was true, absolutely true throughout my whole journey south, that time and ever since, the thing that struck me was that it was terribly familiar. There was only one thing in the South which baffled me at all, and that was simply the etiquette. That is to say, I knew that I was doing something wrong by the way I walked and by the way I sounded. I didn't sound like a Southern Negro. I didn't walk like a Southern Negro. And everyone in the town, everyone in the South knew, and this is what it means, this is what the Southern way of life means. Everyone knew. It's as though we were all walking across a room, a carpeted room, beneath which carpet there were 25 million live wires. One of these wires, if you stepped on it, would blow the whole thing up. Everyone in that room called the South knew where that one wire was. I didn't. That was the only difference, though. I didn't know how to say yes, sir, in the right way, if I could have said sir at all, which was dubious. But the way Negroes were treated there, what people really thought of Negroes, was not strange at all. The way Negro boys and girls talked to me was not strange at all. The way white people talked to me, those few white people who did, let's say in a town like Charlotte, which considers itself, relatively speaking, emancipated. And we'll return to that word, emancipated, in a moment. White people said, race relations here are excellent. We have never had any trouble. Whites and blacks get along perfectly. Of course, they never saw each other, except in very limited conditions, that is in kitchens and under cars, black man under a car. I didn't find a single Negro, though, not one, not even the Negro bourgeoisie, who agreed with this. Race relations there were fantastically horrible, but they were all under the carpet. No one talked about it, therefore it did not exist. Now, when Northerners talk about Birmingham, and appalled as they are by the violence there, what is really in their tone of voice when they talk, let us say, to me, is some desire to be reassured that what is happening in Birmingham is really happening in South Africa, and that it can never happen here being at the moment San Francisco, yesterday Seattle, the day before that Denver, here being New York, here being Chicago, here being in fact the North, where Negroes are accepted until they try to be accepted. Now, this is very important. I said that you're the generation which must begin to change this. What is important is to recognize this, that it has never been in the Negro's mind, and it has never been, in fact, our celebrated Negro problem, either a Negro problem or a regional problem. My problem, for example, the years of my life has never been the color of my skin, I don't care, or the texture of my hair. None of these things have kept me awake till 4 o'clock in the morning. What, on the other hand, has been my trouble, my burden, has been what these attributes do to the people who see them. It doesn't keep me awake till 4 o'clock in the morning, but as far as I can tell, it keeps a great many other people awake till 4 o'clock in the morning. If one believes, how can I put this? I want to make it as clear to you as I can. Let's use a very common metaphor. When I was younger, and in the days when one began to suspect, when one's about 10 years old, when one began to suspect what the future held for you because you were black, and at the point you began to realize dimly, but as a child does very, very powerfully, why your mother spent so much time scrubbing your hair with Vaseline, why you were always told not to act like a nigger. At the point when one began to suspect, in fact, that one was in for trouble for the rest of one's life, I began to hear, somehow, for the first time, that music that we call jazz. Now, of course, this music that we call jazz has been around in this country for a very long time. It dates from the auction block. And white Americans claim to love it. They love spirituals. They love Mahalia Jackson. They love the Duke. They love Ray. They loved poor Billy. They even loved poor Bessie Smith. If anyone had really been interested in knowing, in all these years, what the story really was, there it was. All one had to do was listen. When Bessie said, "My house fell down and I can't live there no more," she was not talking just about a literal flood. She was talking about her sorrow, her pain, and also ours, because of what she had to see and endure. Because, how can I put this to you? What the terms of her life were these, that she had to understand and accept and even rejoice in, that she had no place, no certain place. She was, as we say in another song, a pilgrim and a traveler. Now, this sounds very romantic, I think. What Negroes have had to know in this country, though, for all this time, is that in order to survive, to become a man, one had to learn how to dance. Not like Fred Astaire. The way somebody dances on a tightrope. the way somebody dances in the boxing ring, the way someone learns how to take a fall and how to get up when you're taking the fall, how, in fact, to become a man in spite of all those things which are determined to keep you from becoming a man. That's the Negro experience, put too briefly. And it's expressed every time you hear anything Ray Charles plays on that piano of his, or any time you look into that face. I want to suggest this, then, that as he uses it, as the Negro population has had to use it, so now the country must. There are some uses to which one can put the blues. Because, conversely, the white population has always assumed that there was some way to escape acquiring a face like Ray Charles, or a tone like that, or sorrow like that, or triumph like that. There is still only one way to become a man, or to become a woman. It is something that you do yourself. You take home a little kit, and you put yourself together as many times as you're broken apart. If we think of the Negro problem as being essentially a question of masters, in this case the white population is a master, and victims, in which case the Negro is a victim, one makes a very great mistake, because the white population can no longer act toward this problem, toward this 1/10 of a nation, as though they were all missionaries. Negroes cannot be saved by people who refuse to save themselves. What we are fighting for, if one still believes in it, is to achieve at last the American Revolution. The American Revolution, according to me, assumed that every man in this country had the right to become a man. I think your elders have betrayed you by teaching you that it was more important to become a success, more important to be safe, and have betrayed you in another way. Our entire history betrays us in this way. If one is going to get an education, if one is going to become what is called an educated man or woman, if I am the teacher, the only way I can help you get this education is to teach you how to think. Thinking is not a luxury. Thinking is not something that embroiders a life. Thinking is what a life, finally, in one way, depends on. But in order to learn how to think, one must be taught to think about everything. There can be nothing that one cannot think about. There can be nothing that one cannot examine. There can be nothing that one is afraid to overhaul or to change. It is what's called masculine sensibility. In this country, this is one of the things that it means to be an American. It is one of the great dangers of being an American. In this country, there's always been something not to think about. And what that was me. Sometimes called Sambo, sometimes called Uncle Tom, sometimes a rapist, sometimes a saint. These are your inventions, not mine. The effort the Republic has expended in not thinking about me has weakened its grasp of reality to a very sinister extent. It shows, I think, in every level of our lives, from the most private, so that people ask you in perfect good faith, until today, 1963, 1 year after the emancipation, would you let your sister marry one? They still think that's a question. And they mean it. And they don't realize out of what kind of spiritual and moral emptiness and panic such a question can come. It has never been a question of who married whom, besides which it's 400 years too late to talk about miscegenation. I'm produced by it. If one can be so confused on this level, it means that one doesn't know what to tell one's child. And after all, let me tell you this. In spite of all the books written about how to raise your child and all the theories about it, ultimately you raise your child in one way only. You are his model. If you don't know what you mean, if you are lying, the child will know it. Children don't listen to what you say. They listen to what you don't say. They watch what you do. And they become what you, their model, make them become. We've all been, I think, I know everyone in my generation has at one point or another been in the position of trying in the middle of his life when it should have been done, define a model on which some standard to prove that you could be a man. Because in this country, we no longer believe in them. Now, to finish this off, and then you can have a chance at me. What I'm saying, in effect, is that this is not a white country. It is a myth that we can no longer afford. We are living in a time of revolution. It is our job not to try to prevent these revolutions, but to use them. I talked for a minute ago about the weakening of our grasp of reality. I had in my mind, for one thing, the entire Cuban fiasco, the entire Cuban disaster. And what I'm meaning to suggest by that is this, that we have no right not to know the existence of the Cuban peasant and what that means, what the Cuban peasant lives, endures, and how he must feel toward us. Now, every Negro in this country has some sense of that, so that, for example, it would be difficult for my morale to allow me to go to Cuba, to free Cubans, when I'm not free here. My point is that the country ought to know it. Americans must discover that really they are not the people from heaven. They come from the shores of Europe. We have a long, long past, the human past. Everything that has happened in the history of the world, all the follies, all the disasters, all the heartbreak, that's the American lot too. There's no way to escape it. All one can do is use it. That's life. To say yes to it and to use it, to triumph over it. And then we could finally achieve an identity here and stop being, as we are now, trapped, in effect, between two oceans, one going east and one going west. That's one of the reasons it's so important to be white here, because it's the only thing one can be sure of. And that means if you're going to be white, then someone's got to be black. That's me. Now it's time to end this adolescent nightmare. I look to you to help us do it. Thank you.